Welcome back, everybody, and thank you to all of those who are joining online. Hopefully you've been able to successfully progress across from the previous meeting link to this one. Welcome to those who are joining us in the public forum today. I'm just going to hand over to Councillor Duncan first to say a few words.
Yeah, just ask people to stand for a moment of silence to remember the councillor and community board chairman Michael Dowling. And Michael was an instrumental part of my involvement in politics, where he became, in my first term, where we just shifted the Wedderburn Goods Shed and we had a community project. We raised $20,000 for 20 people in our community, and Mike goes, "You've done a pretty good job there. Would you like to stand on the community board?" And I said, "Oh yeah, no, I'll do that." Didn't know much about it, and at that stage, Edna McAtamney, I think, may have been the councillor, and Mike wanted to be chairman of the board, and he said, "I want to come and see you." And Kelly asked, "I want your support for chairman of the board." And in those days, things might have been done a bit differently, but we got in there and he wanted to do that. And I came down to my casting vote, and right at the start, I thought, well, I've got this community board under control because I've got the casting vote. And Mike was very supportive, but he was a wonderful man. If you've ever been to the chambers in Ranford, there's a massive chair, and Mike was a big man, and he was the only man yet who's filled that chair out. But I'll never forget a trust meeting. Michael said that in our community, we look after the young, we look after the old, and the rest look after themselves. And one of those things that stuck with me. He was instrumental in the rugby club. He set up the squash club, to set up an amalgamation of 2 rugby clubs. An amazing family, and you know, I owe a lot of that political career to what I'm thinking of the Miniatata and how we supported what we want there. And him and Barry Beacon, we've lost both of them within 3 years of each other. And yeah, no, it was quite an amazing guy. We loved supporting Miniatata. All his family lived in the Miniatata, very, very involved with the church. And the speeches at the funeral, even the Central Target District Council were recognised for having the funeral on Sunday. So no, he was he'd be sadly missed. He's probably one of those big tocha trees that every community's got. And it was a wonderful, wonderful day on Sunday at his funeral, because he had mass and he had the bishop taking it, and there was all those wee things that could have been the wee finer touches. And he's got some very humorous children, and some of the speeches were absolutely sensational. The rugby club was completely full for several hours. So no, in saying that, it's a great loss, but these things happen in small communities. They do have a big impact, but it was with great joy that people celebrated Mike. So moments, please.
Thank you very much, Stu. We now move to the report. So this is the purpose of this meeting. Public forum. Mr. Eckhoff, would you like to join us? First up. Familiar face to many, welcome back.
Sorry?
You're a familiar face to many, welcome back.
Unfortunately so. It's like the way it is at the moment. I had hoped that there would be a list of queue of speakers from here to the monument on this water issue that seems to have gathered an enormous amount of attention, and rightly so. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I must admit that I was somewhat perplexed after seeing that rather wonderful photo in the paper a couple of days ago of 3 mayors all stunned at what effectively was a grouping of people who decided they worked for the people of that area and not the government. And that's the bottom line, surely. Water today is the biggest issue this country faces, or close to it. It's a question of ownership, control, administration, and they're all uncertain. In Maori have 2 claims over water, it's Ngā Tahu, and I noticed Kingi Smiler the other day on North Island a similar claim. The RMA reforms are sitting in the wings or waiting, and we don't know how that's going to play out. And frankly, we've got a broken system called local government. Doesn't matter where you look, and I'm not personalising this at all for one moment, but no matter where you look, local government is broken. So it's all beyond reason to ask us to have a sensible outcome or opinion on this. So we're expected to comment on the Department of Internal Affairs, the Minister and other water experts. And I emphasise that because you will be basing your decision making on water experts. So I've just got a very short story to tell you on that from 30 years ago. And I wanted to take water from Elbow Creek, which is above Roxburgh, from one side under the main road and way up the other side. About 1.2 kilometres of pipe was required. So I engaged two separate experts from different companies, two, that knew about water, knew about stuff. And both said, you pump the water from down in the gully right up to a holding tank, paddock, holding dam, 100,000 cubic metres up the top. I didn't like that advice, so I got Ken Harlowich, and some of you will know Ken, quite an institution, the late Ken Harlowich, a marvellous guy. And I still remember him saying, when I brought him up and I told him what we are likely to do, and he said, no, we're not going to do that. And he took a couple of shots across with his theodolite, and put in a gravity scheme that 30 years ago cost nothing to operate, all under gravity. And the point of this little story is the experts were completely and utterly wrong. Their short-term thinking was just that. But with the experience that Ken had, it was brilliant. So even with the high pressure under the main road, it hasn't moved. It's been a great success. I move on from that, just emphasising that the experts are wrong. Not all the time, of course, but with water they seem to be. 100 million is needed for the Falls Dam locally. I was in a meeting the other day. 100 million, and you add the 400. Maybe 500, maybe significantly more that has been talked about for these route decisions that the Minister requires. And we're in a massive situation already, in a difficult situation for so many people with the cost of living. And now these costs are being put upon us already. I don't know whether a CCO is going to be the best idea or a locally controlled organisation. I simply don't know because I don't have the data. I don't have the information, and nor do a lot of people I talk to who are far more versed in these matters than I. But until that information is fully available, we simply don't know whether this is going to be a CCO or a council controlled or a localised control. So I have to look back to what I think can give me some lead or some example of a CCO. And the only one that springs to mind is Aurora. What a travesty. What an absolute bloody disaster, quite frankly, they have been for the people of Central Otago and the cost structures that they have imposed upon us. Excuse my language, but it was an appalling decision, yet they said, well, we'll get experts. We'll appoint people who know all about this stuff. I want to give you just one example of what a monopoly does to people. And they are a natural monopoly, these guys. And the water bodies will become a natural monopoly too. And I hate that concept. Just recently, I was told firsthand that Aurora now charge $400 to climb up a pole and take the power out. Cut the power off to a pole in the interests of public safety for the electricians. They used to do it for nothing. It was called public safety in a public book. And they wouldn't allow the electrical people to do that, the qualified people to do that. They had to do it themselves, and they did so. No problem.
Jerry, just let you know, your 5 minutes is up, so if you just want to wrap up your thoughts and make a last comment.
I can't not. I mean, this is the ridiculous notion that I can get through this stuff in 5 minutes without giving you, you know, there's $800 now. These monopolies are going to charge, and that's the outcome. Finally, all right. Doesn't matter about what Belclutha and Gore are saying, and they don't want the CCO. But I want to ask this question: where's the data? Who will be on the short list to be a director for this company if it goes ahead? What are the estimated savings for a CCO versus local control? What is the value added by going with Gore and Belclutha, who are so different from Central Otago? And as I was just saying before, it's gravel versus mud. We'd be better off if we went to the Mackenzie district, if we are to combine with somebody, if we must. So what is the saving of bulk buying? What are the numbers around that? And yet we're going to create, if we go the CCO way, we're going to create another series of bureaucracies. As for consultation, that's the Local Government Act, relevant clause. And it's simply not happened. Other councils from Invercargill to Belclutha to Gore all have had significant consultation with the opportunity. Not everybody, as you rightly point out earlier, takes advantage of that. I do. But it's all here in section or part 6, clause 83, A, B, C, D, E. It's all there. And it is not happened. I've had my time. If there was any questions, time or about 5 minutes.
Thank you, Jerry. Does anybody have any questions for Jerry?
Yeah, I do. Jerry, you mentioned that I think it was Delta you referred to, or Aurora, sorry, being a natural monopoly. But isn't the council already one of them by the services it provides as well? So whether we're as a council or a CCO, it's still a natural monopoly, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And as I mentioned a wee bit earlier, Councillor, it's a complete disaster right throughout the country. The councils and natural monopolies tend to be disastrous for the people. Not for themselves, they do quite well, it's nicely, thank you, Albert, but for the people that you represent. And you don't represent the council, really. You represent the people of this area. Not the actual council, the bricks and mortar or anything like that. It's the people you represent, not the government. And if you feel strongly about things, I suggest you bring the minister down here, or at least have your representatives turn up, and a number of them, probably about 3 of them would be sufficient, to go through this issue with the public. But they're not having any opportunity to do it. And that is what I find. Whatever decision is made is okay. We don't fire bullets at each other like they do in many other countries, but it's the opportunity to converse with you guys, with their elected representatives, and if the decision goes against you, you just accept it and move on. It's democracy, but when that democracy doesn't happen, I get a bit upset.
I just have one question for you, because you talked about the data and where are the stats and the figures and how much is saved and how much is cost. Attached to this agenda, there is an 867-page edition. Have you read it? Because they are in there.
In part. I fully, I think I fell asleep before I got too far into that. And you do need background in these issues. So I actually rang a civil engineer 2 days ago and asked her about, not local, I wouldn't do that, but it was within the South Island, and to talk about this stuff. And well, she said rubbish in, rubbish out. Well, you can interpret that as you do.
We can.
But-
Thank you very much.
Just question, you've been around long enough, Jerry, that you'd understand the Mike Dowlings and the Minnetonka when they amalgamated. We were told effectively we had to amalgamate to get bigger to fund these things, but we couldn't do the funding of water schemes, and the community there funded theirs. And now there's $6 million worth of protozoa treatment might be going into some of these places. So ultimately it comes down to funding. And the decision we've got to make is what's the most equitable over time. And the decision you put in your water in was gravity over time would always win, but it doesn't always win.
Well,
And they've
I
always-
always understand that, Councillor. I did emphasise, I think, there's 100 million required for the Falls Dam. And that is going to add huge continuous productivity for this region. And I'm not talking about dairy farms, I'm talking about fruit growers especially. Hugely important that goes ahead, 100 million. The question of this other water, I drink about 2 litres of water a day. Using but we don't drink vast amounts of water, yet the government, the minister, is saying that you're going to have to spend all this money so you can sprinkle your lawn, so you can wash your dog, your car, with this potable, beautiful, clean water that it's going to be after you spend this vast amount of money. I just suggest, with respect, that this whole thing, and I've written to the minister about that, and of course, get the straight into the shredder, no doubt, about the reality that people are having to face. And the cost of living hasn't gone away. It's going to get worse. And the prices of things are not going to go down. They're going to get worse. And then I think we need use the word advisedly, forensic examination of this proposal to see whether the advantages are what we would hope they would come. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do these things, and the intergenerational needs are obvious. But for goodness sake, the affordability has to loom large in the minds of people these days, given everything else. And I just don't see how you can do this. I really don't see how you can do it. And it's not just here, it's Waitaki, it's Gore, it's Balclutha, it's Invercargill. The people are saying no.
It's everywhere, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, is the affordability has to loom large in the minds of people. So thank you very much for your time. We do appreciate seeing you.
Well, election October might be the last time I see you guys. Thank you anyway.
Will be for me, Jerry, it's all good.
Thanks, Jerry. Mr. Ray.
I don't dislike it.
Hi,
Morning.
my name's Graham Ray. I'm a representative of the ratepayers group in the Tibet Valley, and myself as well. So I'm here to actually speak about the submissions and how the results are used by council and councillors, or should be. So the submissions in question here are the ones that are about joining of 4 councils forming a water group. You all know this. And I see one council has already pulled out, obviously they've taken into consideration the ratepayers submission response. 1,000 ratepayers roughly, I read in the paper. For the joining of 4 councils, nothing else. It wasn't for the council to use the result for one of their own schemes, like making your own water board or water thing. That's another issue that you should be approaching the ratepayers about. There's a whole bunch of different issues. But you will try, like the report presented to the councillors by Peter Kelly outlining the ways to avoid consulting ratepayers on charges to long-term water planning. Avoid ratepayers is in the paper. What in the world is avoid ratepayers? The words of a school principal on the Hastings District Council for 12 years, Malcolm Dixon, said in an article for the Otago Daily Times about standing for local body elections. You have been elected to serve those who elect you, the ratepayer. To be successful, you must keep in touch with them. Really, Mr. Kelly, avoid the ratepayer? What does that got to do with anything? So Most people just shaking their heads over that one. I don't know why you were voting anyway on this. The outcome of the vote has been made by the submissions, especially for the Tibet Valley. I think we will see if the councillor I'll see if the Tibet Valley councillor will vote for what the council wants, the ratepayer wants, or herself. I was at the meeting by the council in Roxburgh, and you chaired it, and you came along, and Stephen Dance asked a question about distributisation. And that was brought up at the previous meeting run by the previous mayor. And the vote taken about the distributisation were 80% of the people were against it. The community board were against it, from what I understand in principle. Your answer to that was that the result didn't reflect the general opinion of the ward. Do you remember saying that?
You're quoting me. Please continue.
Okay. And I wonder how you knew that. How do you know the opinion of the board?
That's why we have community boards and why we have feedback.
No, but you
why?
didn't say anything about the community board. Said that community board were against it as well, right? And so you immediately changed the subject to talk about the baths again, the third time that evening, and so the whole thing just got forgotten about. And basically, that is how you look at submissions as well. It's just a personal opinion of an individual. You don't have to abide by them. Because it doesn't look like you have to abide by them. So you talked about the baths, and you talked about the baths, and the refinements follow you, really. Like that's a 50% increase in rates for this past year. Amazing. That's on my rates. So this is still a democracy, and it's not treated as a democracy. So Jerry hit on the problem as well. You people just don't listen to us. You're not interested. Well, the ratepayer, all this should come from the ratepayer, but it doesn't. It comes from inside council. So you wonder who's wagging who here, the dog or the tail. But we have councillors, and if we have a problem in our community, we get together as a community, like Manitoba or whatever, then we go to our councillor, which go to council. But it's the other way around. Council are coming to the councillors, and they are just rubber stamped by our council, essentially. And it's not, this is not personal, but it's themed, so actually just rubber stamps everything the council puts up before. And this will happen, we'll see. Because we've already decided, the submissions have already decided on the vote in the Tibet Valley on this water bill. I don't know what you're doing, close water sea behind me. That's basically what I'm at. What thing to say?
What percentage of the Tibet Valley submitted?
That's I do not know. I'm just reading over.
Because you say that the tail wagging the dog, and by that I think you're referring to ratepayers. How do you
I didn't come here for dialogue, right? Because,
okay, next one.
right.
Anybody got any questions?
I'm out of here. No, I didn't come for dialogue at all.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you for listening to me.
You're welcome. Next up, we have Hemi Bedgood from Federated Farmers, who will be joining us online. Can you hear us?
Good morning, Council. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Yeah, great. I'm a Senior Regional Policy Advisor at Federated Farmers in the South Island. Thank you kindly today for facilitating this feedback session. We acknowledge the submissions of other farmers in the district and we thank them for their feedback. We're speaking briefly to some of our key points we made in our submission lodged with Council on 6 June. Governance. In general, we are really worried about what a big new combined water company could mean for farmers. We believe water infrastructure is better, more successfully run locally with close relationships with local councils. Federated Farmers have very little information regarding the makeup of the establishment board or the final CCO board. From our experience in other parts of the South Island, we've been informed that the board could preside over a CEO on $400,000, a CFO of $300,000, a board chair of $108,000, board members $54,000 salaries, and meeting costs estimated to be up to $10,000 per meeting. We note we're in times of economic austerity. We raise concern with new salaries of this nature. Affordability. Central Otago District Council have done a great job at forecasting the capital expenditure in their 25 to 2034 long-term plan. in year one, Three Waters infrastructure capital expenditure is around 49% of total spend, and in 57% in year two. Beyond year three, we can't see a forecast has been made. We acknowledge these are significant future investments required by community and rural ratepayers. We raise concern with the potential costs proposed by Taumata Atawai water quality limits, which are then needing to be implemented by regional councils. We note compliance costs resulting in RMA processes are ever increasing nationwide, and in some instances, compliance costs for basic septic tanks and community sewage networks are expensive. Again, we are in times of economic austerity. We raise concern with substantial increases to debt levels. Given the uncertainty presented by a combined council-controlled organisation, Federated Farmers supports the implementation of an internal business unit. However, if council were to make a decision to form a combined external CCO, Federated Farmers would raise concern with how targeted rating zones could then be applied. In general, rural properties on the outskirts of urban settlements are often subjected to rates increases for services they're not accessing, either because it's not economical or their private connection is sufficient. Our strong preference is to ensure rural ratepayers are not unintentionally captured by future targeted rating zones under a new CCO. And then if there was to be a new CCO, Federated Farmers would greatly appreciate if there were an avenue for rural stakeholders to be included in governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. Has anybody got any questions? Yeah,
Stuart Duncan here. I'm a rural-based councillor. I guess when you talk about, I would be the first to be pushing for the rural avenue, that Gore and Clutha are small, rural, high-performing rural towns. That if you ever were going in other than Waitaki to have a CCO, we're very similar by size, nature, personalities in our communities or in our farming enterprises, that discussion should be had across a district rather than just in one small itemised area. Would you not agree?
I think you've made a good point. I won't present a view on that. I don't have enough local knowledge. And yeah, I don't know enough about the Waitaki situation there. So yeah, I'll reserve comment there respectfully, councillor, but you've made a great point.
Yeah.
Neil Gillespie, Emmy, how many farmers in Central Otago are likely to be affected by this that are connected to the schemes that we operate?
Yeah, well, so that's the thing. So we just don't have enough information on that, and so we're just raising concern that we don't know what we don't know, right? So until we can't really provide a really informed view without pretty detailed knowledge on what that actually looks like. That's our position there.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tracy Patterson here, also rural. I just wanted to, maybe I just correct me if I heard you right. Taumata Atawai also is CODC's regulator as well, not just the regional council. So were you implying that it was just regional council, or?
Oh, look, that you've corrected me there. So that was my understanding, was it was a regional council function. So if that's not the case, point well made.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henry, and I'll just chip in there as yet another rural property that's not connected to a town scheme. When you talk about, you don't know who's connected to the town schemes and who's not, and what the challenges are for farmers here. We know, and that is why we're having this discussion. And we are being regulated by the regulator, and that's why we're having this discussion. So please don't think that we're going to forget about farmers, because Tracy and Stu in particular around this table would never ever let that happen. So we really thank you for your time this morning and joining us.
Yeah, appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Right.
I guess that's one of the strengths of a rural-based CCO, is that you have a whole demographic of different rural stakeholders.
Right, we will now move to the report. I've just got a couple of comments to make first. Julie will be joining us. Is it just you?
Yeah, myself.
And Peter. So it feels like for the vast majority of the last 2 terms in local government that we have been consumed by water, which is ironic for one of the driest places in New Zealand. We swung from one extreme to the other with central politics, and our people have paid. We've commissioned new treatment plants that have improved the lives and the kettle longevity of thousands of people, especially here in Alexandra, while others have been issued with boil water notices. We've trialled new technology at our wastewater plants that have made meaningful changes to the way we analyse and treat wastewater, while other plants have operated under abatement notices. We've seen in the paper what has happened with Clutha's water, Wakawaiti's water, Queenstown's septic fields and Dunedin's pipes. This council and the mayor before me have worked hard to put together the best possible solutions that will result in our ratepayers paying less into the future than they otherwise would have. There are, of course, trade-offs, and we will discuss those this morning. There is an argument for a feeling of retaining local control, but I would suggest that it is just that, a feeling and not more. As our Chief Executive has previously said, water is now a regulated activity and we are being regulated. We do not have a say in the treatment standards for water, the acceptable solutions, the resource consent conditions for discharge, or even the ability to say whether or not a boil water notice should be in effect. What we do have are committed staff, engaged councillors who have read the information, independent reports, expert economists' insights and submissions and feedback from our community, both formal and received in the informal manner at the supermarket and at the pub. Many of your submissions were well thought out, both presenting for and against views. Thank you to those who submitted, especially on the back of our record LTP submissions. When we make this decision, remember that you are the ones who have attended the webinars, read the thousands of pages of reports, submissions and case studies. You have attended the workshops, received letters from the Minister and information from the DIA. You know what the involvement of the Water Regulator and the Commerce Commission means for water into the future for this council. And you know what it means for our facilities and for our people. So on that night, I would like to hand over to Julie to take us through the report.
I'll
Peter's
just,
going to, right.
good, everyone. I'll just touch on it and then technical questions and likely Julie's will help out. Chief Fraser's in the background as well. Fraser's one of the project team on the steering group that's supporting the was the 4 councils, now the 3 councils, as we work our way through developing water services development plan. And this is part of the next crucial decision-making point on that journey. We have to have the plan in by 3rd of September. There's this decision today, and then there's a subsequent decision that will be needed to be made by council in early August, which essentially would ratify the water services development plan. As a result of the discussions and the vote that happened in Waitaki the other day, we had to go out and get a legal opinion on the nature of this report. I've shared that legal opinion with you. There are some amendments that we would be recommending council look to amend in relation to the resolutions, which takes into consideration the outcome of Waitaki. I guess at that point, there are 800 pages to this. It is a big document, principally because it has all the submissions in it as well. But there's quite a lot of technical reports from Morrison Lowe, Infometrics, and DIA who have all independently looked at the information that we've provided them, and they've made their assessments on our suggestions and recommendations. And so, look, at this point, happy to take questions. Julie, do you have any points you wish to make?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say, in this district, we don't actually have any rural water supplies. We don't have provided water like some councils do for rural purposes. It's there are rural properties connected to town supplies, but it's only for the household. Yeah. It is a very complex issue. Probably people are as totally around those complexities more than many. Difficult to explain to people, but certainly we're seeing a real impact in the regulatory moments, and we haven't yet experienced that commerce commissions with the moment. So there is definitely a lot of work in the legislation, even within the next 2 years to uplift, but then the requirements are completely separate in terms of the financial systems and reporting systems and everything is also going to be a big uplift.
Any questions for Julie or Peter?
That's a question, just that this is, I guess we're at the pointy end of, as you pointed out, Madam Mayor, that this has been years and years and years of reading papers and sitting around and talking about it and trying to understand it. And I can understand the public's frustration because they haven't sat around this table and they maybe not have read all of the thousands of pages that we've read, but we are here now and a decision has to be made, and the decision does need to be made on what the experts have told us. Whether that's right or wrong is where we will land in the future. I think when I look back about the previous term and where we've, there was a huge public outcry in relation to that. And a lot of it was about loss of control and about loss of local voice. I believe that this is an opportunity for local voice to remain in the room. And I would really hate to see commissioners or someone being put in to tell us what we have to do. This is potentially our opportunity to actually have a say in how we design it. So that's, yeah, I think the time for questions is we've kind of gone past that. We're here to make a decision. Sorry if anyone else wants to ask a question.
No. What I am, because what I really want to get my head around is that having listened to the feedback that we've picked up, no matter where we got it from, is that there's two main drivers. One is regulation, and as part of that, subset, if you like, is the financial implications. And I guess it will just be really useful before we make that decision to say, just clarify and say, here goes the financial implications of the particular options, because I think they have almost the biggest single bearing on where we're going here. Forget about the government direction and you can't forget about it, but that to one side, the reality is no matter how we do Three Waters going forward, there's a cost. And they all have financial implications, and there's some barriers to that. So it'd be good, I think, just to be reminded of what they actually are and why, in particular. And I guess the best example I can give is that why the council can run in-house or in-house for Three Waters. The council is either an option or financially is an option, or it's not. And I think it'd be good just to make sure that we get that reinforced so it's quite clear. And there's a big driver here, and I think forget about the regulation side of things. What can this community? What's going to cost this community?
I think that would be good to, we cover this off first, because we have put out a submission process with an option that says option 3 in-house business unit, and yet a substantial amount of information and data has come to suggest that that is actually not an option at all. Could you please talk us through that?
Yeah, thank you. And no, thank you for that question. That is traversed pretty well in the Morrison Lowe document, and it goes into great detail, but if I just summarise it on one account. First of all, the amended resolution would, if that is amended, would bring back to you in August a new analysis based on the councils that are still standing. And so the numbers will be different to what's in this report, because this report was predicated on 4 councils. At the moment, it could be 3, it could be 2, we're not sure. And so we will bring back another set of numbers of that financial analysis to you in August. I guess what I can say, and this is a very general term, 4 is better than 3, 3 is better than 2, 2 is a moot point, 1 is an in-house business unit is not an option. It was there because the government and the legislation said you had to assess the status quo. But the status quo, as we know it right now, is not an in-house business unit, because the requirements with the Commerce Commission and the regulator, that whole structure as we know it right now will be looking completely different. We already know, and Julie's alluded us to, with the level of reporting we now need to do to meet the regulatory environment. And that requires more staff. The in-house business unit, just quick numbers. Our debt to revenue, we've got a credit rating, which means this council could go out to the bank today and get up to $216 million. That's 280% of our debt to revenue. That's what the number is. With our AA stable credit rating, we've probably got about $50 million in debt right now. And we're forecasting to spend, just in water alone, the next 9 years in the LTP, well, on the infrastructure plan we submitted, in the order of $300 million in capital just for water alone, and probably another 100 million in OPEX for water alone. That doesn't take into account what we're going to spend on the roading network in terms of capital, doesn't take into account what we're going to spend capital on our other facilities. Just on those numbers alone, we will breach our 280% financial cap. And legally, we cannot go over 280% of our debt to revenue. The LGFA will not allow that. And so the only option open to this council to meet the legislative requirement of financially sustainable, and you'll see in that report, DIA don't think we are financially sustainable under an in-house business unit. That's in black and white. Is to establish a CCO of some description. And actually, what I would say, what the submissions came back with was 2/3 of the people suggested a CCO of some description is the best option for this council. That's what the numbers say on the submissions. 47% said a joint council CCO was actually the best option, and 14% said a CCO, single council CCO, is the best option. Only a third recommended the in-house business unit. So a number of the submitters obviously read the report and realised actually it's not really viable. We would be breaching, well, we don't meet the regulatory requirement, the test.
I'm going to follow on with just a couple of supplementaries that come out of that. One's probably for you. So Waitaki said no. So they're heading down option C, aren't they? Are they going to be financially sustainable? Did the report tell us that?
Well,
Do we know?
my understanding was the report indicated that none of us were financially sustainable on our own.
Which is what
That's
I
what
thought.
the report said to me, but
Yep.
obviously each council will be required to make their own decision.
So they've made it, which is fine. And then so for this council is that it's quite clear that with everything we've got coming our way, we are not going to be financially sustainable under the program that's in place to meet the regulations that are in place for water in particular. We're not there
As an in-house business.
Thanks.
Like I said, issue I've got, it's not an issue. When you look at the page there in Morris Loan assumptions, and they're talking up to $1 billion of savings over 30 years. And I'm going, well, why can't we get those savings now? And it clearly scale makes a difference. And that's actually between $20 and $30 million a year we'll be saving by being in the group. Smarter asset management, we've done a pretty good job of being smarter than what we're doing. And it probably more alarms me that there's been potentially that fat in the system for the last 10 years or 15 years that other people have been taking off us, or we haven't been able to get those savings, I guess. So, you know, they're big figures when you look at what the potential saving for the rate plan. We could ask to the rate plan. It worries me on a front that a lot of big business, sometimes they can create inefficiencies, and you just hope that it doesn't. And that would be a worry that, you know, and I guess people, you can understand people feeling the need that they're losing a say, but, you know, it's just going to be delivered differently, and the funding delivered differently. It's not like I say on the way in, you listen to old music on a CD, but it used to be delivered on the vinyl. Now it's going to be delivered differently, but still music. So I just hope that the figures, I know they're assumptions and they're the best we've got, but the regulator's just making it too tough for us to do what we're doing. And I think if we are going to be in business, we want to be in business with like-minded communities And it's a bit of a shame with what's happened in Waitaki, but if we're going to be with Clutha and with Gore, we're all rurally based. We've got a whole lot of similarities. We've got a whole lot of the old Scotsman and the other old do, you know, understanding what we don't want to give up. But we may as well be in there together. Really, at the end of the day, but those savings are massive when you look at $1 billion over 30 years. But water's an expensive item. And in 20 or 30 years, we'll have world-class status of water. We should be over the hump. And the next generation should be able to pull away from it like nothing else. So it's a tough, big bit of business.
Yeah.
Can the additional priority capacity that's available to the CCO come from the LGFA?
Yes, that's, so they've made provision, so if the funding will come from the LGFA, so it comes at a reduced rate, so we're not paying the market costs going to the bank. LGFA give us at a discounted rate. It's likely that a water services entity would obviously have a credit rating, and so that also gets a discounted rate when on charging interest in the lights.
Really, one of the things that's come up a few times, including in some of the submissions and feedback, is this idea around these astronomical levels of debt and just how much we're projected to spend. And I guess coming off the back of a generation where if you didn't have the money, you didn't get something, you saved up until you could buy it. We've had the benefit of listening to Brad Olsen talking about why debt funding the likes of Three Waters assets is the smart move, but I wonder if you or Peter had a comment to make around the cost variances between what's gone before and what's coming in front of us.
Yes, so I think, you know, that concept of you save up and then spend the money. Where we have the greatest challenges in this district around the Three Waters assets are typically in the small communities where we used to fund by community, by scheme, and those communities just didn't have the critical mass to fund the increase in investment that's needed to the upgrades, the capital upgrades to the treatment plants in particular, to meet treatment requirements for either water or for wastewater. Obviously the wastewater standards are, you know, we're seeing a bit of moderation happening there that will have some financial benefits to us for some of those supplies, but you know, if we look at Ranfurly, Paddy and Rowanese, the Omakau's water treatment supplies, they are the most challenging in our district, and that is because of the legacy of many years of communities not being able to afford to fund that step change, to fund it up front, because we weren't a council that to fund it to do kind of work. So yeah, that's the legacy. That's why those problems exist now, and that is where we are investing in the next sort of within the next 3 to 5 years. We are investing in treatment plant upgrades. That is where the largest amount of our investment goes, and then after the 5 years, we kind of start 5 to 7 years. We start to have to ramp up capacity within the Cromwell and Alexander Clyde networks to meet the growth needs. Even with growth being funded by development contributions, we have to build the infrastructure to enable the growth to then get the development contributions once the growth occurs. So you're front funding the investment. Well, you might be doing a treatment upgrade now for home care that to meet a regulatory requirement, but you build some growth capacity into that, but it might take 20 years for that to be picked up. So you're not going to get the DCs coming in to fund that growth component for a long time. So that's why the debt balancing becomes quite challenging for a community like us, in particular. The implications of growth are really significant in our treatment.
Something that I picked up listening to DIA on the Waitaki call the other day was that they said a dedicated water utility can use debt more efficiently, and it can bring investment forward for capital projects when it's needed.
And I think even, you know, the asset management comment, you know, I've heard criticism of local government and governance, but the reality is that there's been huge drivers over the last decade, and I've had the fortunate thing of being around the table for a couple of decades now. You know, never did people say we want a higher rates increase. You know, people who sit around these tables have to make decisions to keep costs affordable for people, which often drives those things that are not seen by communities being deferred out and being deferred. and we just haven't had the operational funding to be able to invest in the level of asset management that we need to invest in to be able to make really clever decisions about what needs to be done and when. Often it's reactive because something's broken down when we've done a heap of data collection and analysis, which costs money to do. We might have been able to make better forecasts of what was going to happen. So that's where a lot of those efficiencies start to build in these organisations, because they'll be able to invest in that stuff. The Commerce Commission's really going to drive the investment in that area.
I guess if you take the revenues, Federers and neighbours, the regulator wasn't really forcing them to make those decisions anyway. Over a 50-year average, you'd say it's been a pretty cheap system to run.
Yeah.
25 years in the past, 25 years in the future.
Yeah, and yeah.
So they caught up now. Tomorrow, is coming and monitoring and understanding the regulations have to go.
And there was always that out. You had to comply where it was reasonably practical to do so. And in 2020, after 2019, after Headlock North, those words got removed from all legislation and you've had to comply. And we are still catching up 5 years later.
Well, we've got 20 years to catch up.
Because in the past, because the then regulator wasn't regulating,
Yeah.
we chose not to spend the money because there was no obligation. Now we have no choice but to spend that money.
And you know, we know that I think what happens within the community, because they don't see what the potential implications of them are of non-compliance, there's a view that you can not comply. Next week, we are going to be in the unenviable position of advising two of those communities that they're going to be on employer water advisory till December until their water treatment plants are upgraded. Now, that's where the rubber starts to hit the road.
And everyone wants to tell a community, very hard for those communities to understand that they've been drinking that water unboiled for
30 years.
for 30 years, so why suddenly
Overnight.
that you've got your water is becoming undrinkable?
Well, I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, the anecdotes you hear from my mother-in-law about putting a filter on the bath taps to stop when the water was drawn from Butcher's Dam to stop the small fish from getting into the bath. The early days of the terrace where was the water race which fed this town. Communities have long memories, and also they don't. Nobody really likes change, especially if they don't understand it. And again, I think I've said it before in public forums. I said I'm very wary of these proposals because I have this niggling feeling that we may be being set up to fail. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think we have a choice. We were obliged to go out and ask people their comments on the status quo, even though we all know that the status quo is not going to work. And going forward, the decisions we're making here are not going to be popular across the board, but they're going to, we have to put that line in sand so we can go forward. And the growth this community is facing currently now is that, and our wastewater treatment plant will struggle to keep it. And the community of Alexandra and Clyde can't afford the $50-odd million we'll place to the point. So, and the legislation's coming out of Wellington. It doesn't have a check attached to it. So the model that we've been proposed where we can increase our borrowing, putting those costs across the generations who will be using it, not the current users, but the future users, it's the only way it's going to work.
I mean, of that number that we gave you, $51 million of that is to upgrade Alexandra's wastewater treatment plant to be able to cope with the growth multiplied, and Alexandra replace old plant that is getting to the end of its life and getting another pipeline across the big plant because the pipe that's there is not going to be big enough to cope.
Are there any other questions? And then we might just do a quick round the room so that people.
I would check in. Am I right to mirror that most of the findings already gone ahead with joint council controls legalisation?
Not most of the North Island, but they do have some that are further ahead of us than us, including one in the Waikato who have already appointed their 3 directors. Yeah. I think the DIA said to Waitaki there are about 70% of councils in New Zealand are in some form of CCO.
And I think 80% of those are doing joint CCOs.
Sally, did you want to go first?
Sure. I did put down a few notes because I listened to the Waitaki meeting the other day and got a few notes down on paper. And one of the things I noted is that we do need to recognise that with the introduction of the new economic regulator, councils will have less discretion and control over how water services are run and funded. The regulars' oversight will be strong no matter what option we choose, and we're seeing that. And as Julie has alluded, we're going to be putting 2 boil water notices in our district next week. I mentioned a dedicated water utility can use debt more efficiently. They can also implement spend to save initiatives like tackling water loss and upgrading ageing pipes to lower long-term costs. They can invest more upfront to reduce operating costs over time, and they can leverage scale to negotiate better prices and attract high quality expertise. A joint up approach through a CCO provides us with more resilience and scale, which means we can take advantage of new opportunities and bring forward upgrades faster. I think if we chose to go it alone, there are significant risks. As Tracy alluded before, we would likely face the appointment of a Crown Observer to scrutinise our finances. We would totally lose control over where we stand with our waters. They could also require us to move money from other parts of the council to cover our water costs, or they could force us to increase our rates rises to meet regulatory requirements, and the DIA talked about that the other day. This would mean that our council would lose financial control and our community would face higher costs anyway, but without the benefits of scale or resilience that a joint CCO offers. So in summary, I think forming a joint CCO gives us a credible pathway forward to meet the new standards, to manage costs more efficiently and protect our local communities from undue rates rises and deliver better water services for generations to come.
Sarah, anything you'd like to say? Sorry, I know it's frustrating putting people behind Sally. So I'll repeat it.
I mean, from what we've read and how much we've read and how much information has been there that the people at this table have been through, I've listened to Jerry say he fell asleep halfway through reading that, and we feel like that sometimes too. There's a lot to read, and a lot of it's a bit pointless sometimes. Because like you say, we're asking you to look at an option that isn't really an option. And it's really difficult to sit here and make a decision, listening to feedback like that and looking at survey results and looking at consultation. Consultations come in and support a joint CCO. Oh, there's a lot of commentary in there that says don't go joint because we don't want to be with QLDC and we don't want to take on them. And they're things that just aren't true. We're never looking at those options. So a lot of the consultation, when you break it down, I've read every one of those submissions, and that's a repeat. You know, we don't want to go joint because we don't want to go with them. Well, why don't you want to go joint otherwise? Oh, we know otherwise it will be okay. So the submissions, you've got to read them. You've got to also take into account what they're actually saying, what they know, but also what they don't know. We've got the benefit of knowing a lot more because we've read all of that and we've done that. And I don't know everything. I'm listening to Julie, I'm listening to expert opinion, I'm listening to everything. And what I'm saying is I think the decision we're making is based on all of that and what we believe is in the best interest of people. And it might not be what people in the public gallery, people online, people that have submitted agree with, but we're doing our damnedest to make sure that the future is where it needs to be. We don't go down the road that QRDC have done. We don't stymie that development, but we do what we're really being forced into with that regulation. That it's all well and good saying stand up and say we won't do it, but it's not an option, is it? And I think we need to make a decision based on the best interest of the financials and our future and our growth. And I don't see there's much of a choice really, even though on paper there's a choice. Is there? So I think the decision has been made for us to a large extent. I'm happy with the joint CCO being financially a better option than a single CCO, council control here. And financially, because the last thing we want to do is say, okay, we'll go and do council only, and then the costs are even more and the ratepayers pay again. That's not fair either. They're in front of us.
Thanks, Sarah. Stu.
I was at a social function with their former CEO a while ago, and she told me I used to occasionally make some good points, so I'll make it quite blunt. Our growth is going to be unprecedented in the next 20 years, and intergenerational borrowing is the only way that the past can get rewarded for the future. Because up till now, the people on Bridge Hill have been funding the development for other people to pick up the gain and the generational gain and their values. $1 billion, if you look at Brad Olsen's economists, and everyone follows him a bit more, $1 billion across 29 years, or $1.5 billion, we cannot, as elected members, say that it's not going to make a difference, because it does. Our small communities will win. I know it sounds nuts, you feel like you're throwing them under the bus first, but we look at the protozoa treatments in the Pateara, it's been funded because of a greater pool of people, and the decisions are made to do it. Because if it was the Manitoba Community Board, they'll say we can't support $3 million to do a protozoa. Oh, we'll drink the water like it was, and he loved swimming with the fish when he was younger. But we're in a different world now. And our smaller communities, of which we've got to be challenged the authority or the group if we join. That not to forget that we are small communities and we're made up differently. We're not like Auckland where you can poke it out of the Waikato River and treat 400 million litres a day. We are different, and it will have its challenges. It's had its challenges for our staff, and it'll have its challenges for the new regulator if there is one. And I would be the first to chuck the rules out on a lot of things, saying the rules are too tough. But it's probably the first time I've been a councillor awarded that actually they were having to play by the rules. And I don't like that, because like a classic example, go back to Pateara and Nays being Rampley, we're building the plants, we're doing it, but we're still breaching of rules. And it's a bit like giving the speeding tickets, but we don't really know what speed you're going to go yet. So it's understandable the community gets frustrated. And it's understandable we do. But I just, while I've got make my points, it has been incredibly tough on elected members. And we've heard comments today that we'll see what the voting round looks like next time, and that's not a really nice place to be when people are firing those shots and you're making the best decisions. But it's been incredibly tough on staff. And you see it in the face of a lot of the staff, see it in the papers, you see it in the mayor and chief executive. So we're making tough decisions. I think it's the only option we've got, and if it's to the benefit in 20 or 30 years' time, we've got state-of-the-art water and intergenerational costing spread across 30 years, I'm all for it.
Stu. Marty.
I don't think I had much to add to it, and to what Stu said, you know, I'm a firm believer in borrowing and spreading the costs between the generations. In the past, our good Presbyterian Scots forefathers didn't like borrowing money, and that's one of the reasons why Central Otago District Council had very little external or internal debt. Those days are gone. We had a regulator who didn't regulate, so we could choose to ignore some of our smaller communities. We can't anymore. Yes, I know there's a call that we should be pushing back against Wellington. Every 3 years, the residents and ratepayers of Central Otago have an opportunity, as far as who sits around this table, every 3 years we have an opportunity to see who sits around the beehive in Wellington. I don't think we're going to see any changes. These rules are there. And we have to abide by them. And the only option we've got is the option of collaborating with our partners and ensuring that as governors that we make sure that those boards and those individuals involved do the job for the betterment of everybody. So I know where my vote would go.
Ian.
I think that private governance structure needs greater industry alignment. And with the amount that needs spent over the coming decade to meet regulations and upgrade networks, increasing the borrowing capacity seems to be necessary.
Finley.
Oh, the fact is that change has been forced on us by central government, so there is no choice. We consulted and consultation came back at 47.52 for a joint council controlled organisation. The facts state that this is the best option. I take heart that with the departure of Waitaki, we will look at the financials again before we make a final decision. But I have to say, every time I'm sitting around this table, affordability is always top of our minds. So I'm in favour.
Well, echoing a lot of the comments. For me, when I've been looking at all of this information, kind of joining it all up, joining all the dots over the last several years, I've looked at what's going to be a long-term view. Because affordability is on everybody's tongue, and it is a real thing for every community member that we have. So for me, long-term view, affordability, and despite everything else, I am happy to accept what the experts have told us. And it's not just one expert, it's multiple experts from multiple fields. And the affordability has got to be, if that's the centre point, which we keep getting told, what is the affordability? The centre point is that we actually need to follow that, and there's only one option that can actually deliver that for our communities. And that's over the long term. I'm not saying immediately, but like Linda said, and what you said, Peter, as well, depending on what happens in the next few days, we definitely do need to make sure that those financial options are done. But as I said, very start, the decision has to be made now so that we can move forward.
Thank you. I guess one of the challenges you face when you're elected to represent communities is that you're never going to be popular, and you're often considered to have made decisions that didn't suit some people. And this is going to be one of those bigger ones that we're going to have to make today. And yes, we could turn around and we could try and take on central government and tell them how wrong they are. But I think when you get a pretty clear message from the minister says there's no fight to have here because I'll just fix it, and that will be a far worse outcome. Anything we're contemplating today for our community, have the government send in a some sort of Crown oversight manager, whatever, to manage what we are elected to do. The big thing that strikes me about this, it's about the financial implications for us, and it wouldn't matter how you cut it, that if we were to continue to deliver the program that is required, we can't afford it. We're not fiscally able to make it happen. And as Martin said about in the past, we didn't like borrowing money because we would save it up before we did it. But the reality is, in the way the world has moved from in our generation, the way it's moved and where it is now, that's just not how it works. You cannot survive and you cannot get ahead and get things done if you're going to take that approach, unless you win a lotto, and that might help, or not. So you've got to also look at the intergenerational equity and say, well, if the people here today are the ones that aren't going to use the capacity that we're going to be buying, then why should they be the ones that are paying for it? So debt becomes then the only right way, appropriate financial means you've got to fund it. which then you go and look at it and go, look at the feedback we got. Our population is 25,500 people, 303 responded, 1.2%. Scary thing about that to me is that the vast majority of that minority that did respond, the vast majority are older than 60. 60%, 70% of people respond are older than 60, and 30% less than 60. So it's unfortunate, I think, that the community that's probably most affected by our decision today, which are the ones that are going to be paying in the future, have been pretty quiet about what they think. And then we know that from our other activities that we undertake is that that's not new. It's quite a general situation that we find ourselves in. And it's unfortunate because the people that are going to be most affected by it are the ones that are been the most silent about it, and that's not helpful. But I do think that also that 1.2% of your community telling you what they think is pretty silent anyway. So when people will tell me that you did not listen to the majority, no matter which way it is and where the majority lays, when you're dealing with a 1.2% minority telling you what to do, I don't think you've got a case to make anything valid about that. I look forward to working through the recommendations as we're going, and obviously it's going to be picked up with some changes that we're aware with after the Waitaki decision. And what I will say is, no matter what we decide today, it's not finished by a long shot.
Yeah.
Not finished by a long shot. There's going to be more curveballs, more changes, and rightly or wrongly, we've got to do that, and we'll do it now. Can't wait till after the election to see who's going to be around this table. It's got to be done now because that's what we've been told to do. We'll make the best decision based on the information that we've got, and we've got a lot of information that tells us, I think, pretty clearly about where we should be going. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I guess I'll just get it off with, Martin said, are we being set up to fail? Maybe that is the direction for local government at the moment. There's certainly a lot of personal opinions and media platforms pointing in that direction from certain ministers coming in of different aspects. But I guess at the end of the day, if we look at what we're trying to do, which is provide clean, safe drinking water and environmentally responsible discharges into our waterways or onto land at the cheapest possible price for our people of today and into the future, then I think it's really clear what our option needs to be. So on that basis, recognising that the options have changed slightly off the back of Waitaki, I'm happy to move that we receive the report titled Southern Water Done Well, Water Services Delivery Model, that we agree to adopt option 1, a jointly owned council controlled organisation as the council's model for delivery of water services in accordance with section 13(1)k of the Local Government Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Act 2024, and that we request staff to prepare a water services delivery plan containing the matters set out in section 13 of the Local Government Water Services Preliminary Arrangements to be brought back to council for approval and certification by the Central Otago District Council Chief Executive prior to being submitted. So in a nutshell, we know that one council out has changed those numbers, and we will have another set of eyes over those numbers before we make the final decision. It notes the submissions received and thanks all submitters for their feedback.
Second that.
Thanks, Stu. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Dave. The date of our next meeting is end of month, Wednesday, 30th of July. In Roxburgh, yes. We will see you, Jill. Yeah, we will be getting on our regional tour, heading down to Roxburgh, and we will be in the hall. Memorial Hall.
Look forward to lunch.
I don't know, we might have to ask the across the road.
Old-fashioned mutton one.
Yeah, mutton pies.
The old-fashioned one.
I'll pay my own.
So will that be the meeting we can expect to get the feedback on this resolution passed, or is it going to be a special meeting for that?
No, it's scheduled for, top of my head, 5th of August.
5th of August.
And
Right.
you'll receive the analysis and you'll also receive the the Water Services Development Plan based off that.
But can I suggest get some, like save the dates in our calendars?
Yeah.
Is there?
There's one in there.
Is there?
Is
Is
there?
there?
Yeah,
Is there?
there's placeholder.
So there is, oh, sorry. I missed it, so that's right, I knew that, didn't I?
Before everybody leaves, if you can just take a moment and I'll get Peter to close us off with a karakia so you can all have the lovely protection of our karakia before you leave the room.
Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, kia mātina, kini ki uta, kia mātaratara ki te ki aki ana, te hapakura te tio, te huka, ki hau, ki heus. Sure.
Thank you very much.
And more than a karakia,